Hi, this is Ernest Rolfson, the CEO and founder of Fintech. Welcome to B2B Cashflow Conversations, the podcast dedicated to sharing insights and innovations in business-to-business payments, working capital and cash flow management, and fintech entrepreneurship. In each episode, my guest and I tackle questions in the ever-evolving world of fintech and payments, an industry that's rapidly evolving and of great interest to investors and businesses alike. Looking forward to having this conversation.
Great. Okay, so today we've got Marwan Forzley, the CEO and founder of Veem. Marwan's an entrepreneur, a disruptor, and visionary in the payments industry. He's made significant contributions in the implementation of blockchain technology in B2B payments. Definitely one of the movers and shakers in the industry. Venmo actually describes itself as a Venmo for businesses. Is rapidly growing as, no surprise, the B2B payments industry continues to heat up, not just domestically, but really globally. So without further ado, Marwan, great to be with you, man.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. How's you're up in Marin?
I'm up in San Francisco Bay Area,
right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, just outside of the city.
That's where you're holed up. Have
Yeah.
you been there the whole? Have you been there the whole time?
We've been here holding the fort during the whole COVID era. So from the start of COVID till now, we've been in the same spot. My house is becoming not only an office for me, but for me and the kids and the wife. And we're all on Zoom, maximizing our internet usage all day.
You've got to keep AT&T or Verizon happy.
Yeah.
They don't like it when you're not using the pipes.
I am definitely utilizing the pipes.
That's good. That's good. Well, look, thanks again for being with me here. You've been a collaborator for several years now. I've enjoyed getting to know you and work with you. How did you, just for our listeners, how did you actually, and by the way, Veem, you've been at Veem now, what is it, 8 years?
We
10
started
years?
Veem in late 2014. So I used to,
14.
I started Veem. I used to run e-commerce for Western Union, and before that, I was in a startup called Udemy, which I founded and sold to them. And before that, I was in another startup that ended up with Nokia. So I've been sort of back and forth between startups and big companies. And I started Veem at the time. This is back in 2014. There's a simple idea, really, that when you go buy coffee in the morning, you don't think of how you pay; you just do it. Whatever you're doing, you have cash, card, whatever you have in your wallet, you pay and you move on. Your mind is somewhere else. Your mind is on emails and calendars and work and everything else in life. When you do business payments, it's the opposite of that. It's like it's an experience that's full of friction for both the payer and the receiver. And so the experience just goes from like really simple when you go buy coffee to really complex when you go do business transactions. And I thought that's gotta change. We gotta make it a simple way to send money, domestic and international, just like paying for coffee. You don't think about it, and the world of business payments doesn't function like that for a variety of reasons. But it doesn't work like that. And that's why we set up Veem. We set up Veem to make it really simple for businesses to pay and get paid.
Did you have any of the, beyond the kind of personal experience, and I think that's so right, what I think the market could learn from us is that B2B payments is so different than regular, air quote, payments in terms of how much effort and work there is between buyer and supplier. Did you see something? I know that your company was bought by Western Union. You were involved there. Did you see something about your experience there that also inspired you on Veem, or did you learn something about international money movement that you said, I think there's a better angle here? Was that part of the inspiration as well?
Yeah, what's interesting is Western Union is a really good platform to learn about countries and currencies all around the world. And so, when they acquired my company, a lot of my experience have been domestic payments. In all its angles, from consumer to business, consumer to consumer, business to business, but it's all domestic. When I got into Western Union, it was interesting and eye-opening to learn about all the various payment experiences in Europe and Asia and different parts of the world. And that the more I learned about that, the more I'm thinking, man, that whole experience is more difficult when you start doing international. And that's an opportunity to really simplify it and make it look like it's a simple consumer experience and it's like a domestic experience. That's the way we designed Veeam. But there's definitely inspiration from my days at Western Union that, global payments is complex and full of friction, and there's a lot of room to simplify it. And it's an area that can be simplified for a long period of time. It's not like, let me make some quick changes and we're done here. There's room for years and years of simplification that can be factored in, partly because this industry, B2B, has not seen innovation for a long period of time. I mean, if you look back to, well, I would say in the past few years where fintech became hot and sexy, and that's because partly it's been baking for a while that there needs to be changes, and partly because this is an area where you can go at it for a long time making simplification, and there'll be room for all kinds of players to do well.
Right. Yeah, there will be. I mean, it's such an enormous global market. It's inevitable that there'll be multiple winners and angles based on specific needs.
Yeah, it's a big world. So many countries and corridors.
Yeah, no, exactly. You actually, I didn't realize this. You wrote a book, Small Business in a Big World, a comprehensive guide to doing international business. Was that partly because you're focused on the SMB market? I mean, is there a unique challenge around SMB and navigating payments and or international payments? And is there something unique about what you're approaching to solve for that? Is there something crucial to understand there, or something that you really got fired up about? Just, as a layman that doesn't understand maybe SMB versus mid versus large market.
It's an interesting question. So the reason we ended up writing that book because we started with a bunch of blogs about how to do business in China and India and Germany and France and different parts of the world. And it was interesting. I was at CES actually, and I happened to bump into a customer who was telling me, "Man, it's tough to do business with country X." Like, I wouldn't mention the country, but he was complaining that it's hard to.
You want to stay safe.
So he was complaining about doing business with that country, and this business in particular was in the U.S. And then just at the same event, I happened to run into another Veeam customer that was from Japan, and he was complaining about how difficult it is to do business with the U.S. and so like I got into the details of like, so why is it difficult to do business? And then they start talking about all kinds of issues from communication to expectations to logistics, and a good chunk of that was payment related, like just basic stuff like do I actually pay you before you ship me goods? Do I trust you enough to actually send you my money before you ship me the goods? And the other side of it is that if I ship you the goods and I don't have your money, how do I know that you're actually going to pay me? So like basic stuff. And it gets even more ingrained into like all kinds of cultural stuff. So for example, if you are in the US, you would send an email to some supplier in China, while the supplier in China is probably like a lot more interested in actually communicating with you on WeChat or SMS. And so like there's a lot of nuances to doing business between these countries. And I thought it would be interesting to turn the blogs into a book. So that's what we ended up doing. We kind of turned it into a collection of chapters on how to do business in various parts of the world.
The best of.
Yes.
The best of. I love it. The best blog post. You sound like a VC or something, where they have all their blog posts. They've got enough blog posts. They turned into a book. You're like a Ben Horowitz.
Well,
if you've ever read any
I
Ben
got the
Horowitz.
inspiration from talking to customers, though, so that's why we ended up doing the book. It's an interesting, global payments is an interesting thing because you touch on, first of all, how payments work in different countries, but also you touch on like cultures and ways of doing things that are, maybe okay for you in the U.S. that are like difficult to do in other parts of the world. Like I'll give you an example. Um, in the U.S., if I ask you, let's say you're doing a payment online, and I ask you for your social security number, that's something that people do in the US. Like I give you my last four digits and it's a common practice. That same experience, getting somebody's social security number in other parts of Europe or other parts of the world, may actually be a big no-no because I'm like giving you a lot of information here that, why do you need that information? And that's like touches on privacy concerns and security concerns that are there's different tolerance to that type of information in other parts of the world. So you assume that if something works in the U.S., that's going to work in different parts of the world, and that's not true. And it's complicated because every country has its own nuances and stories on what they like and they don't like to do.
Yeah, no, that's and different to that point on collecting social. A lot of it's around regulation, right, and around compliance and safety.
Regulation, compliance, safety, and what's acceptable in different settings in different countries. So somebody who's buying a product in Germany, for example, may find that to be overkill. Why do I have to give you all this data to do something? Well, it probably is a common practice in U.S., Canada, something that people do. So these sensitivities become, they show up when you're servicing customers all around the world.
Um, well, we'll get back to some of that. I want to talk about kind of meeting customers' needs, especially domestically, and what you're doing there, and how you think about the B2B payment space. Um, what I wanted to touch on too is to congratulate you on your funding round recently, right, led by Truist, something like $31 million. You've been able to attract some international banks to support you, some very fancy venture funds, some good names, I would say. What has been, it can't just be the technology. I want to mention to you about blockchain and see your thoughts there, but what has been the drivers around investor interest here, and what are you guys doing well in serving this B2B payment need that is, getting some of these banks to the table to support you that they're not able to do on their own? Because it feels like a lot of your investors are more strategic in nature, that they really understand this, and you've smartly taken advantage of that.
Yeah, and we did this by design. We were interested in partners where there is an investment and there is potential commercial relationship with a partner. It's like BD plus money. And what we're solving for is basically something that the partner values. So if you think of the way it works today, we have payment capabilities, payment infrastructure, we have KYC infrastructure, we have customers, and we have created a model where we see growth with the customers that we have on the system. And so what's valuable to the investor is really the combination of the various pieces collected together. The fact that you can do payment processing with KYC automation, with integrations into accounting systems, with customers that like the product, and you can get enough of them at a faster pace, it attracts capital to help you scale it to the next phase. That's the way it's architected. I do think though that the value that strategics bring is the ability to have relationships with them where really money is a way to align interests and goals and agendas. That's it. It's not necessarily the end all be all. I mean, we can do commercial deals without investment. We can do investments that's just for the pure return on capital. I like the combination where you're getting the investment plus some commercial relationship that you can essentially have
Yeah.
an interaction with a partner that ends up yielding to something that benefits both of us.
Mhm, mhm. Is it that a lot of these partners or banks do they just is it the untapped need in SMB, and is it hard to bring commercial payment solutions to smaller companies? Is there some
Yeah.
gap
So
there
the interesting part about
that you're kind of working to overcome?
the interesting part about
It's almost like when you're dealing with an SMB in a way. Tell me if I'm wrong. Isn't it almost like they have different, almost consumer like expectations around experience or usage, right? Isn't it? It's they need maybe an SMB needs something simpler. It still has to work and be very effective, but almost like form factor is more important than if you're selling to some enterprise company and they're using older green screen technology for a lot of their business. They're not using cloud. Is that a part of it as well, or maybe I'm off base, but love to hear your thoughts
no,
there.
you're absolutely right. I think they're if you look at the banks and how they service their customers, there's a retail business unit that deals with consumer customer, and there's corporate that deals with commercial and larger accounts. SMB is almost lost. It's sort of some banks put them in retail, some banks put them in commercial payments, and the reality is they're neither consumer nor commercial, like nor corporate. They are their own class. They're straddled between the two. They need services that look like a consumer service, simple, easy to use, but they need sophistication that comes from corporate like products where you can do account approvals, payment approvals, you can integrate into accounting systems, you can have multiple types of accounts on the system. So they need more sophistication, but it needs to stay like a consumer experience. And they also have different pricing needs compared to corporate and compared to retail. So they usually are like the most restructured group in a bank. They could keep moving them around, and it's a harder group to service. They don't have enough balance to put them in a in corporate accounts and have account managers on them, and they don't have the pricing that they need is very different than consumers, so they can't be in the retail group. So they end up being this lost, underserviced market, and that's the market we go after. And the reason we teamed up with partners because they know that that's a market that's underserved, and they're looking for tools and services to help for that market, go after that market more efficiently. And that's what we bring to the table. We aggregate that market in a self-serve, simple to use structure that appeals to the partner we're working with.
Right. In your mind, is it right to say that you're helping these SMBs think like big companies in a way, or are you like democratizing access to payment products in a way that maybe bigger companies would, or is there something else that maybe their unique needs are around
I'd
payments
say
that
we're level
make it
playing.
a little different?
We're leveling the playing field. I mean, like some of this stuff that you typically see for big corp. Um, you don't have access. Usually, the banks don't offer it for SMBs. And so, what we do because we're developing a self-serve, pay-as-you-go, simple product, you bake a lot of the functionality that's only available for corporate accounts. You take it and you make it available for the large, small number of customers that want a product like this. So that's the way Veeam works, and level playing the field is a good way of describing it.
Mhm, mhm. Just as a touching back on the technology side, I mentioned earlier blockchain. I don't think we have to go so deep here, but I understood you were one of the first or the first company to do something like $300 million worth of payments through blockchain. It had been hot. It was cold. Blockchain's hot again. We're seeing Elon Musk on SNL talking down Dogecoin now. I mean, what do you think? Do you see a future for this? And what do you think the biggest benefit of blockchain technology is or will be around payments? Like, why do you think it's important that you've made some investment there? And is this something that will maybe be more behind the scenes going forward and is more just really infrastructure and folks don't need to really know how this is happening, but that there's a better way, perhaps? Is that a way to think about it? Or just how have you thought about how to use that for SMB? Because it seemed that's a newer, right, piece of the pie here.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've done this like really early. Back in 2014, 15, we were doing, payments on crypto and blockchain. And the reason we do it is because it gives us the ability to service markets that are harder to get to on using traditional methods. So, for example, if I want to move money to Mexico, traditionally what I would do is I would have my own bank account in Mexico and I have pesos in it. And whenever I have a transaction or a payment that's going to Mexico, I use my pesos position to essentially disperse pesos to the recipient in Mexico. What the blockchain does, it gives me the ability to service that customer using a very different infrastructure where I use crypto as a way to synthetically cross from one fiat to another. So I go fiat, crypto, crypto, fiat. And I also, one of the key things here is going in and out of crypto efficiently because, the price changes all the time. So you got to do it in an efficient manner. Um,
Yeah.
but it allows me to service that market without having essentially all the infrastructure required to do payment processing in that market. It's kind of like a way to get going using alternative technology where the technology gives you an edge compared to traditional methods. The traditional methods here being either bank wire or you set up your own bank account infrastructure. And what's nice about also crypto is that you can do transactions in the middle of the night. There's no banking hours. And you can track payments because a lot of the payments cross on nodes on the blockchain. You can basically Google map your payment. So it makes it really simple to operate the payment flows. And that's why we took advantage of it. It is behind the scenes for us. The customers don't see it, don't know it.
They're not really aware. They're not aware,
It is by design.
and they don't care.
They don't care. I mean, customers, if you're selling clothes or books or furniture, do you really care how the payment actually got there? What you care about is how much am I paying to get this payment delivered to my supplier or my, person that's helping me out on this project by when? That's all they care about, cost and timing. And that's the way we think about it. So we don't expect.
Yeah. No, no.
That's why we.
No, it has to be less about products going forward and more about the experience overall, right? And more about what can you deliver for buyer and supplier.
Yeah.
To your point, they especially with an SMB, they know even less about payments and money movement than a big corporate, right? They're a small mom and pop. They just, to your point, they just want to know the service is going to be provided, and that's fine. And if you can do it in a better, more efficient way, it allows you to expand your business more rapidly and serve your customers better. And that's where I see payments moving, is less about the how. Not to say there's going to be a black box, but I think the payments industry and the banks are struggling with around thinking about, product, pushing card, pushing ACH, pushing wire, instead of more talking about what are the outcomes. What is the experience you can expect? I think you've focused a lot of time on the experience and about a comprehensive solution.
Yeah, I don't think the small businesses actually care about how payments happen, and I don't think they want to learn. That's another thing. We
No.
at one point, this is early on, we kind of started exposing the logic of having, customers choose the rail they want to work with, and nobody cared. Customers want to send money to a location, and they need to understand these two things: cost and time. That's it. How it gets there is like, you do it for me. That's the reason I'm working with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the expert. So you've been, and I don't know where I don't know if it's you share this. I mean, is it fair to say most of your business is international today? Is that an accurate statement
Maybe,
in terms of the flows and the types of customer problems you're solving is international?
we do both international and domestic. International is the bigger piece of the business, but we do quite a bit of domestic.
Right.
Yep.
That's right.
Domestic US, domestic
But Canada, right? Domestic Canada, is that's growing for you?
and US as well. Yeah, both are growing segments.
Can you share, I guess, why the domestic piece is important and the expansion you're doing there? And the SMB space has been heating up. There was a very big Bill.com acquisition this past week in expense management, very high valuations. Um, there's really been several different entrants, only a few bigger players. You're really one of them doing something interesting, but it seems to me that you sense there's a big opportunity in domestic here.
So I'm a little bit,
Help us understand what some of your customers, please.
I'm a little bit different in my approach in that I don't think of Veeam as a domestic service or international service or cross border. I think of a customer. So what do you need to do payments? Let me help you do it. Some of it is going to be domestic, some of it is going to be international, some of it requires foreign exchange, some of it stays in US dollar. And I don't really push it one way or another. It's like whatever the customer wants to do. So we think of it more coming at it from a customer perspective. What is it that they want to do? Rather than are you playing here or playing in cross border? We have a different approach to that.
Understood. Is there, I guess, in terms of the typical U.S. based customer, what are the kind of typical problems you're solving for them?
Generally,
Is it unique? Like and it's the CFO. Is that who you're speaking to? The CFO, or the business owner?
business owner, CFO, controller, sometimes their accountant, depending on the size of the business. And generally, they're looking for a
Yeah.
simple way to move money around, either to pay or get paid. In domestic markets, what they like is generally the ability to pay with email. Like that's what they're looking for. I'm a business in California. I have this supplier that I'm working with in New York. I want to send them some money. And here's a simple way. I don't really have their bank account information on me. It's gonna take me some time to go figure it out. So let me just log in and send the email out. And here's money for you. Kind of similar to Venmo or Square Cash or Zelle. It's like that, but for businesses, and people like that.
Okay, so it's almost like you've removed a lot of that friction, and if they don't have the data available, they can still pay and still let people know that they're trying to pay them.
Yes, that's a key.
Is that a fair summary? That's a fair
That's a
summary.
key value proposition. Is simplicity of experience. Because when you're doing domestic payments, you generally are doing ACH, check, card. These are like the main, instruments, and or wire. So wire tends to be the sort of bigger instrument for larger transactions. Generally, when you're doing, small payments, they end up happening on ACH and cards. Large payments, they happen on wire. So what we're doing is we're basically giving the ability for you to do larger payments in a simple way by email, pulling money on one side and depositing on the other side. And that experience essentially ends up being a wire replacement type experience for domestic markets.
Understood. Understood. Um, uh, our companies partner together and work with you on some domestic payment products, specifically in the check space. I guess tell me why was rolling out a new payment modality important to you and your customers? Why do you see this as being necessary? And do you foresee that kind of, have you seen that in other markets, or you see that customer demand is saying, hey, Veeam, we want and need you to do more for us? Help us understand kind of what, and I think you're calling this Veeam Local. Is that the right kind of your comprehensive, kind of payment solution? I'd love to learn more about kind of how you're
Yeah,
thinking about
Veeam
this.
Local is really the concept of having businesses in local markets pay locally and have choice in their payments. They can choose how they want to pay, check, card, ACH, whatever they want. We teamed up because there's something interesting that happened during COVID. We got feedback from the customer that they want to send check, which is kind of odd during COVID because you assume that because of the situation we're in, people want to go and do electronic payments. What was interesting about it, though, is we have this tracker with Veeam where you can track what happens to the payment. Kind of think of it like a FedEx for payments, where you can gives you details
Right.
where things are at.
Yep. Yep.
And so when they send the check, it sent a notification to the receiver with an expected delivery time. What was interesting about that is the receiver actually never showed up to the office to pick any mail. It's just that when they got the notification that there's going to be a check, they would show up, pick up the rest of the mail, pick up the check, and go. And it was, it's like it's like marrying new and old together. It's like the new stuff was like the tracking and the ability to refine delivery times on things, and then the old is actually sending a check. And so we put them together, which was valuable for the payers and the payees in a situation where still the payer had these processes to send the check and they wanted to do it. And the receiver wanted a way to notify them that, hey, maybe they should show up to the office to pick up whatever mail they have, including the check. And so it ended up appealing to both parties, the payer and the payee. So we ended up teaming up with you to do it. And a lot of that is just back to customer feedback. Customers want to pay this way. So like, who am I to tell them like, choose the other way or maybe there's other ways to do things. I would just go with whatever the customer wants, we do for them.
Do you see this, though, as a way to expand your share of wallet with each customer and be more valuable to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because you're doing more?
I mean, we think of it primarily, we come at it first from the experience. Like, is this a delightful, simple experience? And if it is, what happens is, as an outcome of that, is you end up getting more share of wallet from the customer. Share of wallet is a byproduct of a simpler thing, that I am giving you a different experience than what you get today, and this experience is delightful and valuable.
Prior, they would be doing this outside of Veeam on their own, maybe by hand.
Yes.
Right. And is there something about COVID that was unique? And you probably don't see this slowing down, but in the past, you described that the customers cared less about how things went out the door. It seems around the checks and COVID and your customers wanting to do more with you and get more out of your platform. Was there anything that you could tell that seemed to drive that?
Well, so we
just as a point of curiosity, it's kind of interesting. Cash flow may be an idea. I don't know. I'm just curious if you have any insights.
Cash flow is definitely one of the variables, especially during COVID, because everybody watches, numbers, and especially in a situation where, demand and sales might be more volatile than usual. So you want to keep an eye on where your cash position and when you're going to get paid, and what happens to payments, whether they're in or out off your balance sheet. I think what's interesting during COVID is that we have a lot of online businesses, combination of e-commerce, retail, startups, online business services, and they did very well during COVID compared to more traditional segments
Right.
like retail and travel. And because their business expanded, it ended up expanding both domestically as well as cross-border. And so that was interesting in that we see an uptick in volume on both sides of it. And that's a good sign. Usually business is good. You're servicing more customers, you're getting more revenue, you're getting more sales, and you're expanding on both ends. And that's why when I go back to the organizing principles around this, I don't really think of it as like I'm just going to do your domestic payments or your cross-border payments. I don't think of it like that. I think of it as like you have payment needs. It's growing. Let me help you get there, and we'll simplify it as much as we can for you. Whatever you want to do. If you want to pay with check, with card, with bank, whatever you want, we support. That's sort of how we think of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, Given that they do have choice elsewhere, why is it the experiential factor that people are choosing you over others?
Yeah, I mean the reference point
Is that the big selling point there?
yes, the reference point is Bankfire. I mean, most of these customers they go to Chase, Wells, BOA, smaller banks they work with, and they send wires. And they're looking for a different experience, something simpler, less fees. Yeah, and that's another thing, fees. Like so, you send domestic wire, that's like $20 for example to send the wire. With Veeam, you're sending local payments for free. So just just a simpler free pay as you go. You don't have to worry about setup fees, monthly fees. You have payments, we support you, and a good chunk of it is free. We make money on cards and foreign exchange.
Understood. Understood. So coming out of this, and actually but actually before COVID, small business was up like 15% in terms of your volume. I'm sure you've seen a big snapback so far, especially in some of the verticals you said that have been strong during COVID. You said you have a lot of smaller businesses that are e-commerce and others that probably were just, COVID was a blip in many respects. But with everything that's happened in the world since, and do you think that these other SMBs are going to, continue driving growth? Do you think there's going to be a longer recovery? I mean, I don't know what kind of trends you're seeing cross border and domestic, but maybe of a favorable mix. But it's interesting to just kind of hear your trends about these businesses' needs going forward based on just what's happening.
I actually think something super interesting is developing, and these are structural changes that are going to stay for a long time. And I describe them into two different buckets. The rise of e-commerce. E-commerce is going to stay for a long, long time. I think habits have changed. In pre-COVID,
It's a big acceleration.
you used to go to the store, and if you're stuck, you need something you can't find in the store, you go online. With COVID, you start online. If you're really stuck and there's something you need immediately and you can't wait for it to get to get shipped to you, you go to the store. So that these habits have been like this for like almost a year and a quarter, and so these habits are set now. Now my grandma can do shopping online, and she finds it actually quite enjoyable and simple, and so that's going to keep going. The other thing that I think is a structural change is labor. In the past, you used to employ people around you. So, like, you have an office in Boston, I go find people in Boston, I go, get them to come to the office, and I pay them, deposits on one of the payroll processors. That also is changing, and it's changing quite a bit. We're seeing volume to all kinds of places around the world because if I'm in Zoom all day, does it matter if me and I'm in San Francisco, you're in Boston? I mean, if we're both on Zoom, we might as well also have employees or labor join in from Canada, from Mexico, from Philippines, from Germany, and so you're seeing this rise of remote labor and payments to labor all around the world. That's a big trend, and that's also supplemented by the gig economy and the rise of payouts to that environment. So I think these are like large structural use cases that have shifted, and I think it's gonna be like this for a while. I mean, sure, we're all gonna go back to an office, and we're all gonna find it enjoyable to go to a restaurant and have real meetings in person. But I think some of the habits that have developed during COVID are going to stay for a while and going to be the predominant use case.
It seems like that's where things are going. What you're saying, we've experienced that here. And any business now, you're understanding remote is at least going to be, I think, the majority, or at least 50% of the way people work. And companies, I believe, are getting more flexible about who they do business with and where they hire. So you seem to be spot on the money, unless you're running a factory. there's really no other reason.
Even when you're running a factory, it's surprising how many of the folks in the factory are now remote, you know, joining in on Zoom. I mean, unless you're operating the machine itself, just the management, the project management, the HR parts. Like, I mean, a good chunk of this is like remote these days. So I think the interesting piece here is that this is gone for a while. Like, if this was a couple of months, people will go back to their old ways and life moves on. But this is now a habit. And the thing is, because we've been doing this for a long time, I think assume that this is the way it's going to go forward, where being in the office or going to the restaurant or shopping offline are going to be more like things you just enjoy doing, but not your default, case.
I feel you. What are you excited about next? Whether B2B payments, anything you're excited about, anything maybe upcoming for Veem that you're either planning that you can talk about or involved in, any kind of what are you looking forward to, and any kind of bigger trends, maybe industry wise or otherwise, that you think you're either in a good position to take advantage of or that you see yourself working on here?
Yeah, I think there's interesting trends that are developing for B2B in general. I think you're going to see a lot more, the rise of wallets, domestic and global wallets as a form of payments and exchange of real-time uh, funds between parties. I think the crypto is here to stay, despite you know
Big time.
dismissiveness from all kinds of individuals that, hey, maybe this is something that has no intrinsic value. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. This is something that's
No. That I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that most people don't understand is that crypto is not going anywhere. It is very serious and very real.
yeah, and I think there is appetite, a stronger appetite these days for real time payments, and that's across the board, domestic and international. So the rise of systems that
Hmm.
enable
Hmm.
real time is going to be something that's demanded by the industry, whether it's RTP or cousins of RTP, and same thing in other markets outside the U.S. Um, I think some of the rise of neobanks is interesting, where um, some of the services offered and experiences are very different than traditional banks. I think we're going to see a rise of players in that market, starting with consumer neobanks, but over time also emerging to business neobanks. So that's a trend that we're going to see
Right.
more players in that segment. And I think anything that is cross border in any form, like whether it's consumer, business, payouts, pay-ins. I mean, that market is so complicated that just requires massive simplifications for a long period of time. There's going to be emergence of a number of players that cover that market as well.
So it sounds like you're in the right spot
We're
here.
trying to
One thing I want to mention on was
we're
that
trying to be.
that's right. Well, it's all
Oh,
you
you
can
can
do.
do.
Try your best. That's right. That's all you can do. But I want to say with RTP, this comes up. It's come up actually in a lot of my conversations with other CEOs and leaders in the industry. Do you think RTP is negative for card and card volume, or is it very situational? And do you see this being more important for SMB, or where they're like, hey, we really need to make a payment urgently, and so now we can do this and pay a fee? Because I see it being very negative for wires, which are cumbersome and manual and are doing that same day. And you mentioned earlier $20 a transaction. You know, is there a loser in RTP, or is it really is it situational?
I definitely think it's more situational. I think it's RTP will do well in situations where you're looking to move larger amounts of money in a real time setting with low fees. RTP does that. So it doesn't really. I mean, it might pick up some volume from cards, some volume from checks, some volume from ACH, but in general, it probably will pick up the bigger volume from wire, more from wire than the other systems. And it's just situations where you have a larger amount of money, you need to move it real time, and you're looking for a cheaper way to do it real time. I think RTP will fill a gap there.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing you didn't mention, where we've at Finexio, our team's made a big bet and investment around the timing of payment and speed of payment. We launched something called Finexio Cash, which is about getting the suppliers paid upon invoice approval. So realizing there's a time value of money and getting funds to the suppliers early, where maybe they're still receiving a check and they realize that's slow to deposit, or the buyers are just paying them slower, and some pressures due to COVID and otherwise. Do you is speed and the time value something that is critical, or are you doing anything in this area, or has it really not been for these SMBs? It's much more about the banks can't give them a great turnkey solution, and so that's maybe next wave, and you're really tackling, you know, an experiential component first. I'm just curious. Do you see any convergence around this kind of credit and lending and payments
Yeah,
from
this
where
is
you
a good
sit?
topic. Thanks for bringing it up. And then I think the work you guys are doing in this area is quite valuable for customers. And I think capital and payments are close cousins. They if you ask customers,
Yeah,
what else can I do for you besides payments? Usually they bring up lending. So they're very close to each other. I think there is a lot of room in that
right.
market as well. And thanks for bringing that up. It reminded me that that's an area that it is a key area in the future as well. You're going to see more convergence between what used to be traditional lending and
Yeah,
what used to be traditional payments getting closer to make them simpler for the
that's
customer.
right. It's just natural. I mean, for me, I really think of fintech and what you're doing and what I'm doing as kind of a rail and infrastructure provider. This is all stuff that banks could and
Hmm.
should do. And at the end of the day, everyone has a bank account. You need a bank account to be accessing the system. And so it's incumbent upon us software players to make these products and services available in one package, because they're starting to buy financial products and services from software firms like Veeam, where they don't even think to call up Chase. They don't think to call up Bank of America anymore. So you can make these banking products available. It's more natural for them because companies and consumers are used to now software, and they're used to their phone and accessing, right? You said earlier you don't feel the payment or think about the payment when you're booking the Uber. You're not thinking about how that's getting paid, right? You're just pressing a few buttons on your app and it's happening and a payment occurred. So I see that opportunity for us, both together and on our own journeys around how you bundling in these services and products in a way that they would never even understand how to have that conversation with their bank. And if we can deliver it in a good solution with a good experience, you're going to get a lot of adoption.
Totally agree. And I think that's the reason fintechs exist. The reason we exist is
Yeah, that's no, yeah,
that's it. I mean, we drive
that's
a
exactly
service
right.
to the
That's
user that
exactly right.
that is not being served today by their current providers. So you bang on. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, we had to get business. Me and you have to beat a bank every single time. 100% of the time, we have to be better than the bank.
Yeah,
They serve the great place, and that's fine. But there's a gap right now, so we'll take advantage of it as long as we can. So, while keeping friends with everyone, keeping as many good relationships as we can along the way. It's a very small industry, so have to be very friendly to everybody,
well put.
as you know. I try to only offend one or two people or companies a year if I can. I try to really limit it. I don't know about you. I used to be about one a quarter, and I've cut it down to about 50% reduction.
That's a wise thing to do. Small industry.
So trying to. I I think so. I think so. Yeah. Be someone that people like. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well, look, man. I know you've got to run. Really fun. I really enjoyed it. I hope I'll see you maybe in Vegas at a payments conference at some point. That's where we usually interact. But hopefully, not before long in the Bay Area as well. The one thing you can count on is there's always going to be good weather.
Weather and good food.
And the bad thing about Vegas, we'll have some cigarette smoke and someone spilling alcohol on our shoes. In the Bay Area, you can have some nice sun and probably some nice day. See some sea lions or something, and no complaints.
Well, it'll be good to see you again, hopefully soon.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to shut us down here, but thanks again, and we'll be talking again soon. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Take care of yourself now. No problem.
Thanks for listening to B2B Cashflow Conversations. This is Ernest Rolfson, the CEO and founder of Finexio. I welcome your questions and comments. You can reach me at podcast@finexio.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Finexio Payments. To subscribe, you can go to finexio.com/podcast. Be sure to check out my new episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Thanks, and talk with you again soon.